Hello, everyone, and welcome to UGA Sports Georgia Recruiting Rumors versus Facts. I am Blaine Gilmer here with Jed May and Trent Smallwood as we once again are coming live to you this time on a Wednesday night instead of a Monday night like usual. It'll be the last time for a little while now. We've got all the things that were kind of in our way out of the way, and now we're going to be covering all things Georgia football recruiting. And Jed, is judging by your cheat sheet that you put out today, the page has been turned to the class of 2023, and it is still a pretty wide field open right now.
Yeah, it took a lot longer to build that thing in February as compared to building it in June or July last year when that class was most of the way done. But yeah, Georgia's got 9 commitments right now, which leaves 15 to 20 spots depending on how many guys they take. And like y'all said, there's a lot of room to go. There's no running backs, no quarterbacks committed. Obviously, there's still a lot of holes to fill. So it's time. It's time to look at that class and see where we go from here.
Absolutely. Trent, I mean, thoughts, now that signing day, the more non-eventful signing day is wrapped up, and now officially looking at the 2023s. I know Georgia's been working on the 2023 class for quite a while now already, but what are your thoughts just kind of heading into this fresh start, so to speak?
I think there's a lot of guys in state that I'm looking forward to seeing. With the staff that they have, more of a Georgia staff. If they can lock down those guys in state and keep them from the Clemsons and the Alabamas and those type guys, I think that would be key to landing a top class. There is a quarterback. Out in Mississippi, I guess Mississippi, Louisiana.
Yeah.
I don't know where he lives, but he don't live in the state of Georgia, but they're gonna have some key out of state guys. But I'm interested to see, the Justice Haynes and those type guys if they can lock down the state in this class.
No doubt, and the thing that interests me a little bit is seeing Kirby Smart for the first time going after players who he either played with their dads at UGA or just missed them coming at UGA and is very familiar with them. Justice Haynes is one that you just mentioned. Of course, Justin Benton is a guy who went down to IMG after getting an offer from Georgia way back in his freshman season at Newton. Goes to IMG, now he's back at Newton, so he's back in state. He's the son of Philip Benton, played linebacker in the mid-90s for Georgia. Then, of course, you got Lawson Lucky, who's one of the Mike Lucky's son, one of the Lucky triplets that played for Coach Don, and he's committed as a tight end in this class. Marcus Washington, a Georgia legacy, committed in this class. So the legacy Bulldogs could be paying big dividends in this class, Jed, this 2023 go around.
Yeah, and you look at even some of the I guess lesser heralded guys. Bryce Thornton over at Milton is a perfect example, a guy that I've been impressed with when I play. And I don't know if he's going to end up at Georgia or not, but let's say Georgia, misses. He's a safety star type. If Georgia maybe misses on the Caleb Downses and the Janelle Agueros of the world, circles back on Bryce and says, "Hey, we've got this family connection. Your dad obviously played here about 20 years ago. Why not carry on the tradition here?" So there's all kind of guys and connections, like you said, in this class, Blaine, that adds a little interesting twist, especially when you consider, obviously Kirby's history with this program too.
No doubt, and it says something about this Georgia program, right? When you've got 5, and even when you count, interim head coaches now and all that kind of stuff, 6 or 7 of the last Georgia head football coaches that are in Athens. So it says something about that community, and you would have to think that would bleed over into the sons of guys who played in Athens as well, like in that community. I know, speaking of the community of Athens and things like that, that was a real high point when I talked to Arch Manning's coach not long ago. He said he just loved the town of Athens. He loved the community, loved the atmosphere, and it was kind of part of that quote where he said Georgia hasn't had one misstep in the recruitment the entire time, and that's a big deal. So I know we're going to have a lot of questions about Arch Manning and things along that nature, but Jed, at this point, we're really starting to look at guys that are taking Georgia the most serious here early. Who's Georgia done the most legwork with? They've got 9 commitments right now in the class, and they got a little bit closer maybe to a commitment today with a edge prospect that dropped to top 5.
Yeah, Tamarian Parker out of Phoenix City, Alabama, obviously right across the the border there, and he dropped the top 5 is Georgia, Penn State, Alabama, Tennessee,
Ohio State.
Ohio State. There you go. I missed one. And it was interesting because you talk to a lot of these guys like, oh, Will Muschamp is developing this relationship. Kirby Smart, Trey Scott. Tamarian Parker's best relationship on the staff arguably is with Robert Muschamp, a quality control guy. And that just shows you how deep and talented this recruiting staff is. Tamarian, he came to Athens for the championship celebration a couple weeks ago. And he loves in Athens. He loves the coaching staff. They see him as like a Nolan Smith type guy coming off the edge. And I think, just talking to some guys around that program and around Tamarian, I think Georgia's in a very good spot for him, obviously, right now. And as an aside, Alabama obviously made the list, but Auburn didn't make the list. And I took a detour to the Auburn board as I've done over the past few days, everything going on over there. And those
what
people,
a mess that is.
I mean, there was a thread, one of their guys posted that Auburn did not make the top 5. And there was probably, that thing had 4,000 views and 100-some comments in a couple hours just because people saying Harsin can't recruit. And apparently Auburn didn't make it over to Phoenix City, which is, 45 minutes from Auburn.
I saw one of the things that says, there's your cause for firing.
Yeah, exactly.
There's the calls right there. The calls to get out of that $40 million. I think they would, if they go full buyout on Harsin with what they owe to Malzahn and other coaches who aren't coaching there anymore, they would end up having $40 million committed to coaches no longer no longer coaching at Auburn. I mean, that would be a catastrophe. I mean, then you just started a $92 million facility project overhaul over there. So, man, it's trying times for sure. And two guys,
number 1 recruiting class for $40 million.
Absolutely. I mean, that's 10 more than A&M, right? And don't let Jimbo hear you say that. He'll start going all sliced bread on you and everything, and some guy named Sliced Bread on the internet. I don't even know who Sliced Bread is.
The internets.
Y'all read anything on the interweb, but so Jimbo, of course, upset. But when it comes down to it, 2 guys that Auburn would love to have right there in their backyard that we put on the cover of the show today, Quay Russaw and James Smith. Those were 2, before we get to questions and everything, I did want to kind of recap some of the guys that came through in January already. Those are 2 players that train at Madhouse Training there that every coach basically went through and kind of, kissed the ring of the trainers over there, Saban, Kirby, everybody else, because they produce some crazy athletes out of that training facility. 2 guys from Montgomery, Alabama. James Smith kind of pulled a Justin Benton, right? Benton, he went to IMG. Now he's come back to Carver. So both there at Carver and Montgomery. And Kirby Smith went over there, watched Quay Russaw play basketball. These are 2 athletes that are just off the charts athletic. And Trent, that picture that we have, and I'll put it up here for everybody on YouTube to see again, down here in the bottom right, when you see James Smith standing there, sunglasses and all, beside Kirby, Quay Russaw every bit of 6'3" right there beside Kirby, and James Smith just dwarfs over him. That's a big young man.
Yeah, that's a good looking defensive lineman. I'm sure Trey Scott would love to get his hands on. I mean, he kind of, the thing about it is Georgia's landed some elite defense linemen like your Trayvon Walkers and stuff, but they really haven't landed a ton of elite interior, and Trey Scott's just developed those guys up. It'd be interesting to see what he does with some elite guys. I know Jalen Carter was a higher 4-star, but I'd love to see Trey Scott get his hands on James Smith.
No doubt. James Smith is a guy that is being compared. When I've talked to people around him, they threw out the name Jordan Davis, right, in terms of being big and just freakishly athletic, being able to impact the defense simply by just his alignment alone, right? Like where you have to know where he is at all times, and you have to account for him with the double team block and just pray to God he doesn't blow it up, So that's the kind of player that James Smith is. And, he's really getting up there. 310, I think, is the weight they had him at before. In that picture, James Smith looks a little bit more than 310 in that picture. So I can't wait for the summer to roll around. We get some more, official weights on these guys as they go to camps and all that kind of stuff. But Very, very interesting prospect there. And then, of course, one thing that we have to talk about is the wide receiver hire, right? With Brian McClendon coming back to Georgia. Speaking of former Georgia head coaches, right? He's undefeated as Georgia's head coach as an interim. He comes back into Athens now, and he's already, Trent, making a huge impact when it comes to wide receiver recruitment. And simply another guy that we have on the cover, Brandon Ennis, has already voiced his pleasure with the hire.
I think one thing that McClendon brings is just a known name. They've had a lot of unknown names, out recruiting, and I think it takes a little while to get your name out there. And McClendon is one, and Muschamp, as soon as he started recruiting at Georgia, he's a known name. He's built relationships for many years. I think a lot of these guys like, a Hankton or something, it takes time to build those relationships, and McClendon has those relationships. He's been building those relationships with kids since, 7th, 8th grade. And so he has that, already in the back pocket. He's already built those relationships. And I think that's what he brings to Athens is those prior relationships that's going to help him land some top rated guys in this class.
I talked to Caden Lee, right? Caden Lee, who was at Westlake last year. Now he's moved over to Kennesaw Mountain. And, he said that Brian McClendon had already reached out to him, but since being hired at Georgia, but he said he already had a previous relationship with him, as you mentioned, from Oregon. So going back to he was Oregon, then Miami for briefly, then to Georgia. So Caden Lee had talked to him from back at the Oregon days. And Caden Lee, for those that don't know, he's a little bit of an undersized wide receiver. He's borderline 6 foot, but reminds me a lot in his game of how Jermaine Burton moved around, right? I mean, he's so quick in and out of cuts, tremendous dexterity, catches everything away from his body. So Caden Lee is a guy who he burst onto the scene for Westlake last year, had over 1,000 yards receiving. Look for him to have a big year, and I'm sure we'll get out and cover one of his games at Kennesaw Mountain this year for sure. But he said that he loved the hire, and also another name that he threw out has already reached out and talked to him. Jed, is Mike Bobo, and that's another familiar name that's come back to town and is going to be able to. I don't think there's any substitute for what Georgia has in recruiting when you've got guys like McClendon, Kirby, Muschamp, Bobo that played for the University of Georgia, and I mean that passion just comes out right when they're recruiting.
Exactly. I mean, Kirby Smart, bleeds it no matter. Every time he has a press conference, and those guys, they know the campus, even if it's changed a little bit since they've been in town, but they know what the Georgia program is about. Mike Bobo, obviously, after playing here, coached here for a long time as well, and Brian McClendon too. So they know this program, and I think it even goes a step above guys that have just played at a program when you have guys that not only have played there but stayed to coach. Because obviously, like you mentioned earlier, Blaine, it says something about the community when those guys want to stay. And then obviously come back. Brian McClendon, A, was at Oregon. B, had just gone to Miami. Miami is a cool place, Blaine. We were there for the Orange Bowl. It's a cool place. Kind of little traffic, a little hot, but it's a cool place. And McClendon was there for 2 months, and then he gets the call and he comes back home. So there's some sort of pull there for all these guys, and I think that's going to be something that they'll be able to sell in recruiting, especially guys like Kirby and Muschamp that can do it with a national championship ring now too.
With him being on the West Coast too, it's going to draw those California kids. Just their prior relationships with those kids because he was in California or at Oregon for a while recruiting the West Coast. So he's got those relationships with kids all over the country now, Miami, especially Georgia, and then the West Coast.
At South Carolina, he can dip into the Carolinas too. I mean, he's a guy who did a lot of work. While he was at South Carolina and actually hurt Georgia a little bit in recruiting at times. So, when it comes to that, Georgia's picked up some key pieces. Uzo Dribe, I think is how you pronounce the new offensive linebacker's last name. I'm just going to call him Coach Uzo because it's a lot easier for me. Don't know a ton about in terms of guys he's been able to recruit in terms of I was looking at the track record and things like that, but in terms of, he was a guy who played at Colorado. He's got a he seems to have a lot of energy when he's coming and coaching and things like that. And you would have to assume that translates over to recruiting, because Kirby Smart is not going to hire anyone that he doesn't think is going to be able to recruit at a high level.
I look at him as kind of a guy where they know that they have, which he might end up being a good recruiter like Trey Scott's turned into be, but that they hired him as a guy who's gonna that they feel like can come in and develop talent, and that's what they hired Trey Scott, because they knew, just his background of coaching, and they knew he'd be able to come in and develop talent. And now it's turning over to recruiting with him, because he's going to start putting guys in the NFL. But I think that's kind of what they're looking at. We have recruiters on the defense staff. Now let's find somebody that can really coach them up, relate to these kids, and I think this is what this hire is. And Georgia has a history of putting outside linebackers, inside linebackers in the NFL. But I think he's going to be able to come in and develop this young talent, because although they do have Nolan Smith and Robert Beal coming, there's a lot of young guys behind them that's going that need that development. And I think Uzo is going to be a guy to come in and help with that.
And speaking of, we talked about the community earlier with Athens and all that kind of stuff. Well, we also have a community over on the vault and the vent and all that kind of stuff. And Trent, you're already getting a apology for a little banner you must have had back today with a little pine tree. He's Eric M saying, this is Pine Tree here. He said he loves you, Trent. That sorry for the little bickering y'all had today. Y'all getting a spat on something on the vault. What's going on, man?
I don't know. He was talking about I can't even remember what it was, to be honest. So it wasn't a big deal to me, because I can't even remember what we were talking about. So something about it was about Arch and the quarterback pecking order. As far as Georgia's recruiting a couple of different quarterbacks, and all of them might not have a committable offer. Arch might be the only one that can commit right now as far as that. But I was just explaining that Georgia's not approaching it that way. Georgia's going after they're not only going after Arch as going after him hard. They're going after a couple other quarterbacks hard, and whether they got a committable offer at this point or not.
Yeah, that's what remains to be seen, right? And there's going to be some interesting timing that we're going to address right on here. And guys, everybody in the YouTube chat, we're not ignoring you or anything like that. We handle all the people who are on the vault first. That if you subscribe to UGASports.com, part of the deal every month is that great community over there with the vent and the vault. And we do a post each week for the show and let people submit questions. So we're going to answer those first, and then we'll get to the YouTube comments later on in there in just a little while. So without further ado, let's go ahead, Jed, and hit our first question here from Elko Dog.
Yeah, Mr. Elko says, who are the must-have guys based on position of need for the 2023, God, old habits die hard, 2023 class?
Yeah, I think the biggest needs in this class are going to be offensive line and wide receiver, right, in terms of on the offensive side of the ball. So I guess when you have to ask there, who are the biggest guys, the biggest targets that you can go after, I think Brandon Ennis is the one that jumps out at me. Of course, if this was a couple years ago, Trent and James Coley was here, as Coach Don would like to say. He says James Coley is the greatest South Florida recruiter ever, like bar none. Like that's it. Give him that mantle. But you've got now, Brian McClendon, who of course was there. I think that's a huge advantage, as we've already talked about. They have two good ones, 4 stars already committed into Quavius Sari and Raymond Cottrell. If they could add somebody like a Caden Lee, I mean, they've got a bunch of others, Braylon James out in Texas, that they're going after. But I think wide receiver and then offensive line could be a big deal for Georgia in this class.
I think running back as well, because I think you have the potential to lose maybe 3 guys after this year. Kenny McIntosh, Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards. Don't know what his future holds. So I think running back's a position, because you're bringing in Branson, you're bringing in Paul. Those are 2 more power backs, but you're losing your, you had your James Cook this year. You have your Kenny McIntosh next year. You always need that threat out of the backfield, especially catching the ball. And I think that'll be a position that Georgia needs to fill as well.
Jed, in terms of those offensive linemen, I mean, you put a bunch of them on your cheat sheet today. If they're if there is those running backs that Trent talking about, they're going to need people to replenish up front, because this will be, Georgia didn't take as many numbers right in the offensive line. Maybe I think only 4 this time around instead of the 5 or 6 that they usually take. So some of those guys are going to be moving out, whether it's via transfer or out of eligibility. Who are some of the guys Georgia's looking at up front in the offensive line in 2023?
Yeah, you look at Madden Sanker out of South Paulding. I mean, he's a guy. We've seen him. He plays very physical. He's very agile. He's a wrestler too. So obviously that's something that you look at as a coach. And I think Georgia's and Blaine, I think you'd agree, Georgia's in a very good spot for him right now. They've made him feel like a priority in this class. He's been on campus, I don't know, it seems like 15 times over the past few months. Obviously Bo Hughley is already committed.
Miles McVay, right?
Miles McVay. There's a bunch of guys. Miles McVay's out there. Logan Reichert's out there. In I believe both from Missouri. Samson Okalola up in Massachusetts. I actually spoke with him last night. So there's a bunch of guys kind of scattered a little bit all over the place that Georgia's going to like to add in this class.
And the one that if above all, if they could get one that, in terms of, if I was in charge of the recruiting, the guy that I would put the budget on to go after would be TJ Shanahan Jr. that moved out to Westlake High School in Texas. I mean, unbelievable physicality out of TJ Shanahan. We saw him at the Rivals 5-star. He came with all the rising, seniors last year as a rising junior and dominated. I mean, he was dominant.
Offensive line.
Yeah, he won the MVP for sure. So TJ Shanahan Jr., he plays nasty. He's been to Georgia. He's visited. He's got a good relationship with Matt Luke. They have to worry a lot about Texas A&M, right? Texas A&M, him being an in-state guy, and the University of Texas. USC's after him hard as well. Lincoln Riley and those guys. But if Georgia can stay in that thing and get him on an official late, that would be huge for the potential of the offensive line class there. All right, Helifano says, knowing the offensive and defensive schemes that Georgia runs, what position is the easiest for a true freshman to make an immediate impact? And what position would be the hardest? I can answer the hardest. It's quarterback. Okay. It's quarterback. In Georgia's offense, it's quarterback.
I think it's quarterback on offense and star on defense. I think that would be the two. This the toughest. Easiest would probably be defensive line and running back would be my guess. Running back's harder because the blocking schemes, but just pure playing as a freshman, I think wide receiver's tough. Quarterback's tough. Brock Bowers kind of proved that tight end wasn't as tough, but he's just kind of a freak. So I would say running back and defense line.
I agree wholeheartedly. The only other one I would throw in there is maybe if you're just a unbelievable corner, like a Jaheim Singletary, could have an opportunity to come in and play right away. Because, if you're just that elite of a guy and end up being someone that they truly believe in, they can say, hey, we're going to, scheme it up to where he's in man coverage, and that's all he's going to have to worry about. They could simplify it. And Georgia even played a lot more zone this year in this defense. So I think what makes the defense so hard to play under Kirby's defense, especially, is all the match coverages they run. And, I think that makes it tough for a freshman, picking that up, especially if you're not an early enrollee. But yeah, I would say corner as well. Is probably the next behind defense line. And then Jed Helfano had a follow-up question here.
Yeah, early impressions on the 2023 class in Georgia as compared with recent years. With LT Overton reclassifying, the top-end talent certainly takes a hit.
I don't know about that. I'm just being honest with you. I don't think that's a big. I don't think that's as big of a talent hit as you think to the top of it. I don't know necessarily that. Well, I may write a piece on something on that later, but I don't know necessarily that he would have ended up as a 5-star in the class of 2023, even if he'd stayed in the class of 2023. So, that aside, I think early impressions in the state of Georgia, you got to look at guys like Bo Hughley, who has shot up the rankings. I mean, he's one of the top offensive linemen, ranked out there now. He's a very high 4-star, 6'7", 275 pounds. He can really play out there. I think Justice Haynes is unbelievable talent. Like we said, Justin Benton is a guy who's a 4-star that's out there. So, I think, if you're talking about the top quarterback, he's out in Louisiana, but the top running back is in Georgia. Top receiver in Florida. So, I don't know, Jed. I mean, what's your impression of the 2023 class in terms of, overall talent?
Yeah, I mean, there's some guys that you mentioned. I mean, look at Bo Hewley, who, like you said, is rising up, and Madden Sanker, who I believe is the number 1 or 2 offensive guard and the newest rivals ranking. So if Georgia, obviously Bo Hewley's already committed, you get those 2 guys. Those are 2 guys from right in your state that very easily could be starting on your offensive line. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball, Caden McDonald from North Gwinnett, Stefan Green from Rome, Kayshawn Thomas down in Brunswick. I mean, there's some guys kind of all over the state that are out there. McKay Lee at corner. Caleb Downs is the number 1 or 2 safety.
Yeah, Caleb Downs is 54. He's 23rd overall.
Yeah, and Raul Aguirre as well over at Whitewater. So there's guys there's not one position I don't think that's super super deep, but every position it seems like has got a guy near the top of the list that's right here in the state.
Gabriel Harris and Vic Burley, 2 edge defenders that are both in the top 50 in the state. So I don't know about that. I think the state of Georgia is just fine when it comes to talent in the class of 2023. All right, Jed, what we got next here?
Colony City Dog. What top receivers are the Dogs looking good with right now? How would an Arch Manning commitment help with these or other top receivers?
Well, in terms of, we've mentioned him before, Brandon Ennis. I think Georgia has a good shot there. They went out and they visited Braylon James out in Texas. The former coach, his name escapes me right now, but the former coach, he used to be the coach of the national team at IMG, has headed out there to DeVal, where Braylon James plays, and Kirby Smart and Todd Monken and a couple of those guys went out there and visited that school. So I think they get a good shot with guys like him. I mean, they're after Jalen Hill out in Longview, Texas as well. So there's that state of Texas, Trent, has really become somewhere that Georgia's not afraid to go into, and that may say something about how down the Longhorns have been over the last few years.
Yeah, it just depends on if Texas A&M's got any oil money left. You mentioned wide receivers. You got Hakeem Williams too down in Florida that Georgia's after. I think Georgia. I don't see many guys in the state of Georgia, which we've talked about in the past as far as wide receivers in this class. But I think you're going to be able to hit the Florida and Texas hard in this class and land some good elite talent there.
Yeah, like I said, Georgia is going to be looking to reload at wide receiver in this class, because it's just the way that it goes, right? The cycle out, the Donnie Mitchells and all those guys, they'll be entering in their junior year with hopes of going to the NFL and all that kind of stuff. So they got to kind of re-up and things along that line. So we'll keep a check on all those receivers, but the ones that we mentioned there, the Braylon James, the Brandon Ennis, Caden Lee, all those type of guys, they're in good position with Hakeem Williams, like Trent mentioned as well. So those are the type of guys there that you're looking at. All right, PA Dog 610. With the addition of McClendon and the possibility of landing Manning, in your opinion, does this attract elite wide receivers? Jed, we were talking about this before. I think this is a pretty good, pretty straightforward answer on this one.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, I mean, just so we spend a little more time on this question than 4 seconds, it's like Trent mentioned earlier, the connections with Brian McClendon all over the country. I mean, we talked with Kyler Casper from Arizona, who Georgia offered, I believe, in January, and you reached out to him and he's like, yeah, I know Coach McClendon. He recruited me in Oregon. I mean, there's guys all over the country that Brian McClendon has recruited that Georgia is now going to at least have an in with. Is Brian McClendon going to land, every top receiver in California? No, but if you have connections with those guys and you get them on campus for visits, then, an unofficial could lead to an official, could lead to a return visit, all that kind of stuff. So those kind of connections are going to be huge, huge, huge for Georgia, especially in these next couple classes. with these guys that Coach McClendon already, has relationships built with from other places.
And Trent, when it comes to Arch Manning, one reason that he's such a big recruit, it's not simply his skill set, right? It's also the Manning name and the Manning marketability and all that kind of stuff that comes with it. And now in the age of NIL, that, Trent, is just something that, receivers say, oh, I could be in a commercial with Arch Manning, something like that if I'm his number one, like that kind of stuff. So, I think that's something that has to be taken into account now.
It definitely does, because I mean, you land a guy with a name like that. It's just going to help you out, and I think you'll see if Arch does pull the trigger to Georgia. I think you'll see definitely some guys come with him, and I'm looking more towards the rotations have been bigger. I think that's been a big complaint. If you look at Oregon, the rotations were a little smaller, especially when him running wide receivers at Oregon. So I think you'll see it. Maybe 5 or 6 guys. I don't think you're going to, see anything like Alabama where they run 3 guys all season and end up where they did at the end of the season and not have anybody that can fill in. But I think you're going to see that push down to about 5 or 6 instead of 8 or 9. And there's no telling what would have happened this year. I think injuries caused the depth, the rotations this year. I think you saw the injuries, and then you saw A.D. Mitchell and Ladd McConkey come on strong at the beginning of the year. Then you start getting guys back healthy, and then you really can't take A.D. and Ladd off the field. So you're stuck with a 7-8 man rotation. But it'd be interesting to see the rotation, because I think that plays a big factor with especially with negative recruiting with Georgia at the receiver position.
No doubt. I mean, I think that could be a thing of the past now, just simply because Kirby Smart can say, yeah, well, you may not catch as many balls or something like that, but we won a national championship, 14 guys in the NFL Combine, which is more than any other team. I mean, that's a big thing to throw out there. So I agree. I think that maybe they can combat some of that, and McClendon's style of rotating guys could help out as well. North Buckhead Doll says, where does Texas stand in the recruitment of Arch Manning, and would the hiring of Cutcliffe as an offensive analyst make them the favorite over UGA? Were they the second team behind UGA? Jed, from everything that I've gathered, I felt like Texas is they're there, but they're nowhere near being them and Ole Miss are kind of the teams. I feel like this is an Alabama-Georgia race.
Yeah, it's like Georgia and Alabama tier 1A, and then you got Texas and Ole Miss 1B, and then below you got the schools like Clemson who were in it and have kind of dropped out. So yeah, certainly everybody knows the Cutcliffe angle, and it's a valid question to be asked. And I don't, if we want to really get our tinfoil hats on, is that the reason Texas hired Cutcliffe? I don't know. He's obviously a good offensive mind, or else he wouldn't have been a coach for as long as he has. But the guys at Georgia, Buster Faulkner, Kirby Smart, obviously, Todd Monken, they have done such a good job cultivating these relationships with Arch over the past, couple years or whatever, how long they've been recruiting him, that I don't think Arch would pick Texas over Georgia solely because of Cutcliffe being there, just because of the job Georgia's guys done. Could he end up going to Texas? Absolutely. But I don't think Cutcliffe is the deciding factor by any means.
Trent, I mean, also, Cutcliffe, no, I mean, it's not that it's end all beat all on the age marker, but he's 68 going on, or 67 going on 68. It's got another year before Arch Manning even gets on, campus. He may be there with Sark for a little while and say, you know what, I just want to not do this anymore, so there's no guarantee he'll even be there.
Yeah, and I talked to somebody tonight, and they actually said point blank, the Manning family is a smart family. They do their research. They've been on many visits. That they're not going to make a decision based on a hiring of an analyst, basically. I don't see. I think Cutcliffe is that. They are very close to Cutcliffe's very close to the Manning family. Of course he is. But I don't think Arch would necessarily make a decision based off of that. I think they've done their homework. I think they've done they've gone on numerous visits to a lot of top schools, or a lot of his top schools over the past year. And I think they're doing it right. I think it's a smart family, and I think they're going to make a decision, but it's not going to be based on, hiring of an analyst last minute.
Oh, I agree. I think they're gonna have they've when you got a family like the Mannings that have their fingers in so many businesses, right, and so many different business ventures, there's 5 and 10 year plans and all this kind of stuff. They had to know since a freshman when he was tearing things up that hey, this is coming, and they've been planning this out for a while, like you said. So I think that I don't know how big of a overarching factor that will be in this recruitment.
And I don't think the Neil thing's definitely not a big thing because the Mannings have money, but I also think wherever he goes, he's going to make. He's going to make Neil money. It doesn't matter where he goes. He could go to anywhere, Pittsburgh. He could go to anywhere and make Neil money. So I don't think the Neil angle is going to be a factor at all in his recruitment either. So.
Yeah, and like you said, it never hurts to get some of that money, but they'll put it in like a blind trust or something. Like you'll see it later. He won't care about any of that kind of stuff. He won't be hurting for sure. Now the next question we have is from Mikey P 1983. Y'all heard anything from current recruits about Coach Deribe? Uzo Deribe that arrived from TCU. I have not had anyone that I've spoken to yet talk to me about him. He's literally just got on campus here at Georgia. I did see that he is starting to make a lot of interactions on social media and all that kind of stuff with Georgia high school coaches and some prospects around the state, current Georgia commits, things like that. So I think he's just now, Jed, just kind of starting to wade into this new environment, and I'm sure he's taking a lot of tips from the current guys on staff.
Absolutely. I mean, same here. I mean, I did trade some messages with Rico Walker over the past couple of days. Guy that's very versatile. George's looking at him, outside linebacker and tight end. And he basically, yeah, I've heard from Coach Deribe. So he, like you said, he's starting to make those connections, reach out to these kids, and that's going to be a part of the job. Is we know I remember talking to kids last year. It was the same thing when Jamila Dye came in. One of the things you do when you come in is you got to text all these, either the kids that are committed and say, hey, we still want you here, or B, all these other kids and say, hey, you're going to be a priority for for me as well as the other position coach. So that's going to be his life for the next couple of weeks, and then he's really going to start hitting the ground running when guys can get on campus again and really start meeting them and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure that he has a list that's already been given to him of guys to pinpoint and go after, and he'll be doing his own evaluations as well. So no doubt he will hit the ground running when March goes here pretty soon. OU Herschel Walker, do you have an expected timeline for Overton to announce or sign, or will it just be announced whenever he shows up on campus in Athens or College Station or Jackson State with Deion Sanders? So, wherever he ends up. Jed, you talked to Overton here lately, when he announced his top 5 schools and that he was reclassifying. Did you get any kind of indication there of, what his timeline would be like?
As fun as it would be to stake out Athens or Texas A&M looking for LT Overton to show up, that is not going to be the case. He's going to take official visits to all of his top 5: Georgia, A&M, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Oregon. And I believe he said the plan was either late April, early May. He didn't give a definitive timeline on that, but yeah, that's the plan. So it's going to be another couple months. Obviously the contact period or the dead period's going to have to lift before he can get on campus at these places and anything like that. So that'll happen, and he'll rattle off these official visits, and then I'd look for late April, early May to see where he ends up. Personally, I think it's a Georgia A&M battle. I think it has been a Georgia A&M battle for a while, and we'll see. It's like we'll see how much the NIL plays into it. Obviously, A&M hasn't shied away from throwing that money around in this class, in the 22 class in particular. So we'll see. We will see how it goes. I honestly don't know what to expect at this point, but I do think it's going to be between Georgia A&M.
Trent, do the dead period rules apply to Dave Portnoy and Barstool? Do they have to stay away from during the dead period?
I mean, I wouldn't assume that has anything to do with the dead
I
period.
know. I'm just saying it's kind of turned into a running joke over there. You'll see guys drop in on the vault now. They say advantage Jackson State because who knows what's gonna that Travis Hunter commitment. And then there was a wide receiver as well. Name escapes me. 5-star at the
Kevin Cole.
Yeah, Coleman that ends up picking Jackson State as well. So Deion's definitely not done. I just always like to throw it in there now that anybody that you don't 100% know where they're going, watch out if Jackson State could pop in there for sure because it's crazy stuff. Anybody's guess at what Deion's doing and how he's gonna do it down there. I know a lot of the Power 5 schools are not taking kindly to it at all. Like they're not happy about it.
Recruiting's going to be a crap show until they do something about, I guess, drawing recruits in on nil money. I think they got to do something because you're going to see these things happen. I mean, you're going to see kids go for the money because, I mean, not all kids are like Arch Manning where they come from a wealthy family. They see money and they're like, hey, I can take care of my family now. I don't have to wait 3 years. So, yeah,
I just wonder what the odds are in Vegas if you could find a line on does Travis Hunter finish his college career at Jackson State?
I would definitely 100% go down there and bet no. I think he's gonna go. I honestly think he's going to go for 1 year, and I think he's going to transfer to somewhere, then get his draft stock up, and hey, let's get drafted. So.
He could set a whole new trend. He could go 1 year to Jackson State, go 1 year to a Power 5, sit out the third year, do all year draft prep, nothing but commercials and NIL, and then end up heading to the NFL. So who knows? There's lots of trendsetters out there and a lot of different things that are coming about right now. Lake Dog Rob, do the Dogs have a legit shot at Cormani McClain? I know that we had a update recently from Adam Gorney there. Jed, talked to Cormani McClain and saw what was going on there. What's the feeling on Cormani right now?
Yeah, I mean, Georgia was a school that hadn't been mentioned a whole lot with him, and then he kind of, relatively unexpectedly showed up on campus that last weekend in January, and by all accounts, Georgia killed that visit. I mean, it went as well as you could possibly go, and according to our man Adam Gorney, Georgia is at minimum, one of the front runners, if not the clear front runner right now after how that visit went. So, it's one of those things. He did have a tweet today, or was it today or yesterday, that said something about, coaches leaving. It's hard to build relationships, whatever, something to that effect. Obviously, Jamil Adai was still at Georgia when he visited. Now he's not. So I don't know if that was about Georgia. That was the first thought that popped in my head. So whoever the new defensive backs coach is, we'll have to do a good job of reiterating that. But yeah, I mean, Georgia definitely vaulted itself into that race. And no matter who the new defensive backs coach is, Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp are still going to be here, who have a little bit of experience playing defensive back in college of their own.
Oh, no doubt. I think Georgia on the defensive back end, quite honestly, I think Will Muschamp was doing most of the recruiting this time around anyways, in my opinion, not Jamil Adai, because I think they were having Jamil Adai focus more on guys down the line, right? Because he didn't get in time to have an impact on these class of 2022 guys. So I think that'll be a pretty seamless transition and not as big a impact as many would make it. I obviously did a good job for Georgia. Was the coach of the DBs when they won the national championship, but I think that would be something that whoever they end up replacing with, it'll be a rather seamless transition right there. This next one is an interesting question. I couldn't remember off the top of my head. John Adams 88. Did we know what the recruiting hashtag for 2023 class? Isn't it Savage Season?
Savage Season, and it's a 2-3 in place of the Z, right?
Yeah. Savage Season, I believe, is what that is. So they get pretty creative with those. They always find ways to do it. Man, I was looking, Trent, you'll appreciate this too. I was looking at pictures from back when Sony Michel and Nick Chubb and all those guys committed. The graphics department at Georgia has come a long way. I mean, it looks like, Joe Smith in his basement with a $9.99 Photoshop license or something was just kind of piecing stuff together for him back then, and now it's pretty unbelievable what they're able to do with their graphics.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting how it's trickled down to high school. I was looking today and I saw high schools, high school baseball starting, and I saw some high school baseball stuff where they were putting out their players or announcing players and having the lights and stuff behind each player. And yeah, all that stuff's come a long way, and it's definitely come a long way at Georgia. Georgia's department's top notch now. Back in the day, it was not so much. So.
Oh yeah. Now, when you talk about high schools and stuff, like especially in the state of Georgia, Parkview and Buford, two programs that have unbelievable graphics. Grayson as well. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's almost like, there's no recruiting in high school, right? Well, don't tell that to these programs, the Graysons, the Bufords, the Gainesvilles, all that are really ramping up these graphics efforts, because what do these kids see all the time? They see social media. They're like, oh, that's cool. I may want to go there just because of how this program is presenting itself online and things like that. So you're absolutely right. It's trickled down for sure. Jed, what we got from Big Dog 885?
Yeah, Mr. Big Dog says, if Nico I am Oliva wants to commit to UGA in the spring, does Kirby take his commitment or hold out for Arch?
I think there's a question mark next to that because I think that it'll all depend on how they feel about Arch. I think Alabama's in it with both. Georgia's in it with both. I think you might see one kid at one school, one kid at the other. So I think you're just going to see, and that decision might give away Arch's decision. But I think it'll depend on how Georgia feels about him, how Alabama feels about Arch, how Georgia feels about Arch at that time to see where he goes. I definitely think Arch is the number one guy on the target list, but Nico is definitely up there.
Well, when Nico, says he's going to make a decision in April or May, whenever it ends up being, if it's that soon, that'll really tell us who thinks they have a legitimate shot at Arch, right? Because they're gonna push all the chips to the center of the table and say, okay, go ahead, Nico, sign where you need to sign, and the others are gonna stand put and say, all right, we're not gonna fold. We're gonna wait in here and see what happens. So it's going to be a interesting timeline for sure when it comes to what does Nico do, and then what does Arch Manning, who stays in the Arch Manning sweepstakes subsequent to that, for sure. A little bit of breaking news right here, guys. Looks like Caden Proctor from Des Moines, Iowa, has just put out his top 7 schools. He's 6'8", 330 pounds, and Georgia made those schools. So he's got Michigan, Oregon, Alabama, Notre Dame, Georgia, Penn State, and Iowa. Not a guy that we even really talked about a lot or talked about at all when we talked about offensive line, but this is a huge class for Georgia, and he's one of the top tackles in the country. So we'll follow up with that for you and try to get some information from that and get it out to you in the coming days. UGA Farm Dog, he has a little fun question here. Any 23-3 prospects from Bishop Sycamore that Georgia is after? Disappointed that we didn't sign any in the 2022 class. Yeah, that Bishop Sycamore thing was wild. It's amazing that ESPN let that happen. But yeah, I don't think any of those kids actually ended up going anywhere. I don't know. Some of them were 25 years old.
I think Manti Te'o's ex-girlfriend has a little brother.
She was the cheerleading coach.
Yeah, they're in there. So maybe we'll see about that.
Golly,
it was a crazy time. Crazy time. Scuffletown Dog, any insight about Nichols Harbor and UGA? He said, I watched his huddle and he is awesome. Hope the new coach DeRibe has been in contact. Listen, whether Coach DeRibe has been in contact with Nichols Harbor or not, I can't definitively say, but I will say this: Georgia is very, 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 very interested in Nichols Harbor. There is not many people that can run the way that he can. The time that he threw down the 200, I think it was sub 21 in the 200. I mean, he was absolutely flying. Big athletic kid. Nichols Harbor, Scuffle, you're exactly right. Nichols Harbor is somebody that I spoke to not too long ago, and he told me that him and Kirby Smart talk very often. So he's got a very good rapport with Georgia, and he's looking to make a visit this spring or summer down to Athens for sure. Shown up 253. With today's college football offenses, which position group would you say is the most vital and one we, Georgia, must recruit at an elite level? I think it's different for Georgia because Georgia's done it differently than every other team, Trent.
I would continue to say offensive line, because I think offensive line is the way Georgia played this year. You still have to have the offensive line to pass pro, but you got to have them to you got to still have that run blocking that can get the push. And I would say the most important position is still offensive line. You could go wide receiver, you could go. I don't think running back's as important anymore, but it is in Georgia's system. So, I do think offensive line on the offense.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to be able to methodically move the football, right? And Georgia's looking for those explosive plays as well. But that time of possession seems to be their, a big contributing factor when you have that suffocating defense on the other side that Georgia, I feel like, will always have as long as Kirby Smart is the coach. And then we got our final question of the night from the vault, and then we're going to hit some YouTube comments. So, guys, if you're on YouTube watching, you want to ask some questions, we got a few minutes. So hit some comments in the YouTube, and after this question from the vault, we'll get to them. So people watching, like I said, put some comments in the YouTube, and we'll get to them. But Jed, what's Lewis06 got to say from the vault?
Yeah, it says, would we accept Tank as a transfer given the immediate logjam / problems it would cause with K&K, assuming that's Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not Del McGee, but I say if Tank Bigsby's on the market and wants to come to Georgia, you sign that deal in a hurry. Just bring him on in and let the chips fall where they may.
I think if you sign Tank, Dejon probably transfers, but I think you would still have your three guys, upperclassmen, up there just like you would with Dejon there. So I mean, if Tank hits the portal, you gotta think Del McGee is gonna be one of his first phone calls.
Yeah. Now,
Absolutely.
It could be interesting if Brian Harsin is fired tonight, tomorrow, whenever, Del McGee may be one of the first phone calls that Auburn makes to be their next head coach. So, who knows how that could turn out. Now, whether that Georgia would be able to continue to, every time there's been a threat, right? Georgia's been able to give Coach McGee a little pay bump and let him know how much he's appreciated and keep him around. But eventually somebody's going to come knocking, and Auburn could be that school. We'll see about that. But it's going to be interesting, guys, as that goes on. About the fiasco with Michigan right now, and people need to just pay attention to all these coaching staffs, Trent, because it used to be a Big Ten school or something like that didn't really affect you that much, but now with Georgia recruiting all over the nation, all over the world, they had a guy that it was originally from Nigeria that's now in Maryland, a guy from Europe that's now in Connecticut that they've offered in the last week. It's truly a worldwide search for talent for Georgia.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I think it all started, back in when Kirby started, landed Isaiah Wilson, and they've kind of expanded out. They've landed some guys from California, and landed
Philadelphia,
Xavier Truss up in Rhode Island. I think Kirby has taken it from more of a regional land the top guys in your region to a national standpoint. Since he's been here.
Yeah, and the amount of guys, like I said, that they're starting to bring in from Texas, and they're targeting from Texas now. It's always been traditionally for years it was California, Texas, and Florida that were the places that produced the most talent. I think the high school ball in the state of Georgia has risen to where it's as high quality as any of those states, in my opinion, in terms of who they're putting out and things like that, especially quarterbacks. Georgia, of course, missed out on a lot of these, or didn't handle maybe the situation right when it comes to Deshaun Watson came through Georgia, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. So, I mean, there's a ton of talent that came out of the state of Georgia recently, the quarterback position, and even more when you talk about all the other positions. But I think that Georgia being able to dip into those traditional powers of Texas and California, Brock Bowers coming from California, and do that consistently, Jed, that makes Georgia just that more formidable going forward year in and year out.
Yeah, and like you said, when you get those guys, you develop those relationships with coaches in that area. I mean, over the summer, Anaya White obviously went elsewhere, but Georgia can go to Anaya White's high school coach and say, hey, we got DeAndre Swift from up here, Mark Webb. Tyke Smith had just transferred in at the time. So you start building these relationships. It's always been thought, hey, you build the relationships with coaches in your state, neighboring states, but Kirby Smart has taken this thing. It's nationwide now, and the national championship obviously only helps that brand. And, that's the type of thing that, that's going to fuel this Georgia recruiting machine for years to come.
Helps the brand, helps his helicopter. He got rid of that yellow one, got a red one after winning the Natty. I mean, it's all kinds of, it's onward and upward when it comes to Georgia in terms of that kind of stuff. But to your point with the kind of the relationships kind of splitting out off of the guys that you get, Dylan Bell that's coming in from Texas this time, who hosted him, it was Adonai Mitchell. And Adonai Mitchell, yeah, he graduated from a school in Tennessee his senior year, but he was originally from the state of Texas, right? Lewis Seen, a Texas guy, but originally from Massachusetts. Now you got Jonell Aguirre, who is up there in Massachusetts that Georgia is heavy after in this class of 2023. So it's all about connections, all about relationships. And speaking of relationships, we appreciate the relationship with you guys here watching the show each week. Make sure to do us a favor, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications. If you don't subscribe to the UGASports.com event or vault, you need to get on there today so you can ask us questions each week, be first to get the breaking news, all that kind of stuff. And guys, we really appreciate it. This has been another episode of Rumors versus Facts. I am Blaine Gilmer for Jed May and Trent Smallwood, and we will catch you guys next week on Monday night for another episode of UGA Sports Rumors versus Facts.